I firmly believe that if you defend and you rebound and you share the ball and you play hard, you can be successful on any level. I don't know if you can win the championship. I think to win the championship in the NBA, you really have to have some great players. And, I've been fortunate in that regard. I've been around this game a long, long time, longer than I probably ever imagined when I first started out. I've coached in the ABA, I've coached in the NBA, I've coached in college, and I've had a chance to watch this game change through a lot of different generations. So naturally, people ask me about players. They ask me about Allen Iverson. They ask me about the great Detroit team we had. They ask about the Lakers, the Celtics, Michael, Magic, all those incredible players who came through this league. And every once in a while, somebody will ask me, Coach, who are the 5 greatest players you ever saw? That's almost impossible for me to answer, because I've never believed greatness was just about how many points you scored or how many championships you won. Those things matter. Of course they do. But when you've coached as long as I have, you start looking at different things. You notice whether a guy makes the people around him better, whether he competes every possession, whether he understands how to play with 4 other people instead of trying to do everything himself. I've seen some unbelievable basketball players in my life, but there are a handful of guys who made me look at the game differently. Those are the guys I remember. Let me start with a guy I saw before most people around the country really understood what kind of player he was. Connie Hawkins. I grew up in New York, and basketball in New York was different back then. You learned the game in gyms, on playgrounds, anywhere somebody could put a ball in your hands. And Connie was one of those names you heard before you ever had to ask whether he was special. Then I got the chance to see him up close. I've said this before, and I meant it. Connie was Julius before Julius. He was Elgin before Elgin. He was Michael before Michael. He was simply the greatest individual player I ever saw. What made him different was the freedom he played with. Connie had those enormous hands, and he could control the ball in ways that just didn't look normal for a man his size. He could take it off the glass, push it up the floor, pass it, finish above the rim. There were things he was doing in the 60s that became much more common years later. And I had to deal with him when we were both in the ABA. I was playing for New Orleans, and Connie was with Pittsburgh in that first ABA season. Pittsburgh won the championship, and Connie was the league MVP. When we met them in the finals, you understood very quickly that you couldn't treat him like an ordinary forward. He could score, he could rebound, he could create for other people, and he had this ability to turn a broken possession into something dangerous. But when I think about Connie now, I don't just think about what he did to us. As a coach, I always believed you had to teach players to play the right way. You had to trust your teammates. You had to understand spacing and timing. Connie reminded you that the very best players could see possibilities before a coach ever put them on a board. And, I think about what was taken away from him. He lost years when he should have been playing at the highest level. By the time he finally got to the NBA with Phoenix, he had already been through the ABL, the Globetrotters, the ABA, and trouble with his knees. And he still became an All-NBA player and an NBA All-Star. That tells you something. For me, greatness isn't always about having the cleanest career or the biggest collection of trophies. Sometimes it's about seeing a player and knowing the game hasn't quite caught up with him yet. Connie Hawkins was like that. He made you imagine what basketball was going to become before the rest of us had seen it. The next guy for me has to be Julius Erving. And I know people today remember Dr. J, mostly from Philadelphia. They remember the Sixers, the NBA Finals, the championship in 1983, and all those incredible plays around the basket. But I remember Julius before all of that. I remember the ABA. I was coaching in that league when Julius was becoming Julius. And believe me, you knew immediately that you were dealing with something different. I'd already seen Connie Hawkins do things that seemed ahead of his time. Then Julius came along and took some of those possibilities even further. You know, he could make the game look beautiful without making it look easy. That's an important distinction. Julius was long, athletic, incredibly graceful, but there was toughness underneath all of it. People remember him flying through the air, and I understand why. But if you were coaching against him, you couldn't just sit there admiring the highlights. You had to figure out how to keep him away from the basket, and that wasn't easy. When Julius got the ball in the open court, you were in trouble. He could cover ground so quickly, and once he got near that rim, there were angles available to him that didn't seem available to anybody else. But what I respected most was that he wasn't just an entertainer, he was a winner. In 1976, my Denver team had the best record in the ABA. We had a terrific group, and we believed we could win the championship. Then we faced Julius and the New York Nets in the finals. Julius was unbelievable in that series. They beat us in 6 games, and he averaged more than 37 points a game. As a coach, that's the kind of thing that stays with you. You spend hours preparing, you change coverages, you try different people. You think you've found something that might slow a guy down, then he solves it. That's what great players do. And Julius carried himself in a way I always admired. There was dignity about him. The game was getting louder around him. The ABA was fighting for attention, and Julius became one of the people everybody wanted to see. But he never needed to make himself bigger than basketball. I've coached a long time, and I've always believed the greatest players have a responsibility beyond scoring points. Teammates watch them. Young players watch them. The whole league watches them. Julius understood that. Connie Hawkins showed me where basketball might be going. Julius Erving helped take it there. Then there was Magic Johnson. Now, Magic was different from Connie and Julius because the first thing that stayed with me wasn't necessarily what he could do by himself. It was what happened to everybody else when he was on the floor. You know, I've always believed basketball is a game of 5 people. I probably said play the right way more times than anybody ever wanted to hear. Share the ball, make the extra pass, don't hold it, don't make the game harder than it needs to be. Magic understood all of that naturally. He was 6'9", playing point guard, and at that time you just didn't see somebody that size controlling a game that way. But the size wasn't really the remarkable part to me. It was his vision. Magic could get a rebound, turn his head, and suddenly the entire floor opened up. Guys started running harder because they knew there was a chance the ball would find them. A big man ran the floor because Magic rewarded him. A wing filled the lane because Magic saw him. That kind of player changes the behavior of an entire team. And as a coach, that's priceless. When you played against those Lakers teams, you couldn't relax after a made basket. You couldn't admire your shot. You couldn't complain to an official. If Magic got the ball and you weren't back, the possession might be over before your defense was organized. But there was something else about him that I respected even more. Magic loved making the right basketball play. Some superstars want every possession to prove how good they are. Magic didn't need that. He could dominate a game without taking 25 shots. He could score when the team needed him to score, but he seemed just as happy creating something for Kareem or Worthy or whoever happened to be running beside him. I always admired that. Years later, when I coached different kinds of players and different kinds of teams, I kept coming back to the same idea. Talent is important, You can't win at the highest level without it. But talent has to connect people. That's what Magic did better than almost anybody I ever saw. And people sometimes forget how competitive he was because they remember the smile. That smile could fool you. Underneath it was a guy who wanted control of the game. He wanted the responsibility. He wanted the ball when things got difficult. And he understood that leadership didn't always mean taking the final shot. Sometimes leadership meant knowing exactly which teammate should take it. That's why Magic stays with me. He didn't just make basketball look exciting. He showed what happens when the greatest player on the floor also believes completely in everybody standing beside him. Then there was Allen Iverson. And, this one is different for me. Because with Allen, I wasn't watching from another bench. I wasn't studying him from a distance. I lived it with him every day. When I came to Philadelphia in 1997, Allen was already somebody everybody wanted to talk about. He had unbelievable talent. He was fearless. He could get anywhere on the floor he wanted, and he played with an energy that you couldn't teach. But we didn't always see the game the same way. That's probably putting it mildly. I believed in defense. I believed in sharing the ball. I believed in practice, preparation, doing the little things over and over until they became habits. Allen played from instinct. He saw things differently. And there were times when that drove me crazy. We argued about playing time, shot selection, responsibility, all kinds of things. So that part of our relationship was real. But what people sometimes miss is that underneath all of those disagreements, I had enormous respect for how badly Allen wanted to compete. He was one of the smallest guys on the floor almost every night, and yet he played like he was the biggest. He'd go into the lane against guys who outweighed him by 50, 60 pounds. He'd get knocked down, get back up, and come right back at him. You can't coach that. You can draw something on the board, you can teach footwork, you can talk about spacing, but you can't give somebody that kind of courage. The year that probably says the most about Allen was 2001. He was the MVP. We had a team that defended, competed, and trusted one another, and somehow we kept finding ways to survive. We had to win Game 7 against Toronto, then another Game 7 against Milwaukee just to reach the finals. And then we went to Los Angeles. That Lakers team hadn't lost a playoff game. Allen scored 48 in Game 1, and we beat them in overtime. I remember watching him in that game and thinking this was exactly who he was. He wasn't afraid of the moment. He wasn't impressed by who was standing across from him. He just competed. No, we didn't win that championship, and Allen and I certainly didn't have a perfect relationship. But as I got older, I started understanding something better. Allen challenged me just as much as I challenged him. He forced me to understand that coaching isn't about making every player become what you want them to be. Sometimes it's about understanding what makes that player special and then finding a way to help him become the best version of himself. Not a day goes by that I don't feel fortunate that I got to be part of Allen's life. Because when I think about the greatest players I've ever been around, I don't just remember talent. I remember heart. And Allen Iverson had as much of that as anybody I ever coached. And then there was Michael Jordan. You know, when you're coaching against Michael, you learn pretty quickly that there really isn't one thing you can take away. With most great players, you try to find something. Maybe you force them left. Maybe you make him give the ball up. Maybe you crowd him. Maybe you put a bigger guy on him and make him work harder for every shot. With Michael, you could do all of that and still walk away wondering what else you were supposed to try. I saw him when he was young, when all that athletic ability was jumping off the floor, and then I watched him grow into something even more difficult to deal with. He learned everything. That's what separated him from me. Michael didn't just rely on being quicker or stronger or jumping higher than everybody else. He studied the game. He learned how defenders were playing him. He developed that post game. He became better with his footwork. He understood when to attack and when to wait. And the older he got, the smarter he became. I remember coaching Philadelphia against Chicago in the 1991 playoffs. We actually beat them once in that series, and Michael scored 46 points in the game we won. Think about that for a second. We won the basketball game, and the guy still gave us 46. That's the kind of problem he created. You could feel good about the defense for 2 or 3 possessions, and then suddenly he'd find something. Maybe he got to the foul line, maybe he got into the post, maybe he beat somebody before the help arrived. And what always impressed me was how personally he seemed to take competition. I coached a lot of talented people. Talent doesn't always mean somebody loves the fight. Michael loved the fight. If you challenged him, you had better understand what you were doing, because he remembered things, he wanted to beat you, and then he wanted you to understand that he had beaten you. As a coach, I respected that enormously. People talk about the championships, the scoring titles, the MVPs, and all of that is part of his story. But that isn't what I think about first. I think about preparation. I think about responsibility. I think about a superstar who understood that if everybody in the building was looking at him, then he had to set the standard. I've always believed coaches can teach a lot of things. We can teach defense, we can teach spacing, we can teach how to share the ball, but we can't manufacture that need to compete. Michael had it in a way very few people ever have, and after all the great players I've been fortunate enough to see, that's probably what stays with me most. When Michael Jordan walked onto a basketball court, he didn't just want to play well. He wanted to establish what the standard was. And for a long time, everybody else was chasing it. You know, when you've been around basketball as long as I have, the names start to pile up. Great players, great coaches, great teams. And eventually, you realize the game gave you a lot more than wins and losses. I was fortunate enough to coach at a lot of different levels in a lot of different places with a lot of different kinds of people. Some of those relationships were easy, some of them weren't, but every one of them taught me something. That's probably what I appreciate most now. Championships matter, they always will. Banners hang forever. People remember the big games, the finals, the great performances, but records get broken. The league changes. Another generation comes along. What stays with you are the people, the players who made you rethink what you believe, the guys who forced you to become a better coach, the people who reminded you that basketball is still supposed to be played together. I've been incredibly lucky. I got to spend my life around this game. And after all these years, I still believe the same thing I believed when I started. Defend, rebound, share the ball, play hard. And if you're fortunate enough to have some truly great players beside you, well, you might just have a chance to do something special and